Okay, we're continuing with this book right here, The Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers, going in alphabetical order. The topic we're on right now is Genius Quotes. This is part 4 of Genius Quotes. I'm trying to show people, one of the things I'm trying to do with this YouTube channel is to save Western civilization, and I believe people of Western civilization, most of them have never learned the history of their own culture. Western civilization pretty much means civilization. There's not that much cultural achievement outside of Western civilization. Yeah, there's some, but it's nothing compared to Western civilization. Okay, they're almost synonymous. And one example here is Copernicus, figured out that the Earth went around the sun, for example. And, he was a priest. You can call him a deacon, whatever you want to call it. And what I'm trying to say is that the modern scientific method came from the Catholic Church. Okay, if you study it, read Rodney Stark history, etc., you'll see that. I'll just show you something here. I have a statue of, this is the Pietà, and there's Christ on the lap of Mary, his mother. Michelangelo's own mother died when he was only about 7 years old, and he's very sad. He longed for his mother, and he missed his mother. And this statue of Christ dead in the arms of Mary reminds me of Michelangelo longing for his mother. It's magnificent. It's the most beautiful statue ever made. I have a copy of this in my house. My mom used to collect all these religious statues. I have some, nothing like what my mother did. I wish I had more time and more money. I would do more of that stuff, but I don't. Okay, I'll show you one other great genius. Because if you want to become a genius yourself, if you want to at least learn about them, you need to know the history of them some more, okay? So here's another great genius. This is the great German genius. This is Gerta. Johann von Wolfgang Goethe. And he was kind of like what Shakespeare is to England, that's what he is to Germany, but even better than that. Okay, he was not only, he was a great scientist, a great biologist, a great writer, a great poet, a great statesman, absolute genius, this guy Gerta. Okay, his real famous first book was The Sorrows of Young Werther. Okay, later on his big famous book was Faust, and then Conversations, I think with Eckhart or something like that was another one of his great books. He's real inspiring too and uplifting. Reminds me a lot of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Okay, we're going to do some more genius quotes, but I'm also going to show you a couple pictures each time because, you learn something from a picture you don't get from the text. Now here's something from a book. The book is called The Genius Famine by Bruce Charlton and Edward Dutton. In the modern world, they tend to hate geniuses and aggressively try to silence them. We're kind of becoming like these third world crap hole countries. Because one of the things you'll notice is the vast majority of geniuses came from the Western countries. Why isn't there more geniuses from these Asian countries, for example? And the reason is because they were typically run by brutal dictators. There's lots of people with high IQs in, India, China, Korea, and all these other places. But usually there was some dictator in charge who kicked everybody's butt and didn't allow anybody to do unique, innovative things. Like in Egypt, for thousands of years, you're not allowed to do anything new in these creative sciences, okay? Or in art, for example. And so when you've got that type of brutal control from top down, nothing gets achieved. Okay, look if you read the scientific literature. Just ask anybody who reads the scientific literature. How many scientific papers come out of Soviet Russia? Like next to zero. Almost nothing comes out of there. How many good movies? The only thing that's worth a crap is something that makes fun of them, like, Dr. Zhivago, okay? Or A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, or, Solzhenitsyn, okay, Gulag Archipelago, all that stuff. All right, Ivan Ilyich. All right, anyways, let's go through this quote here by Dutton on his book, The Genius Famine. He says, geniuses have an endogenous personality, means things come from within, with innate high ability, inner motivation, and intuitive thinking. They think individually, they're not conformist. Endogenous personalities are usually socially awkward at best. They're thinking about their project, whatever it is, their science, their field. They're not that concerned like most people are about chit-chat and being popular in their little clique. The genius stays focused on a problem longer than most men. For him, solving the problem is an end in itself. It is what he most wants to do. The highly able endogenous personality is the archetypal genius, the creator of original innovations that are vital to civilization itself. We have a genius famine now, partly because intelligence is in decline in the West. People are becoming stupider, and that's because the water is poisoned with fluoride, it's poisoned with aluminum. They form a complex that the fluoride, lowers the polarity of a molecule to facilitate traversal across the blood-brain barrier, and they're both neurotoxic. You think that's an accident? And all the estrogenic chemicals? Estrogenic chemicals, by the way, are quite often neurotoxic. Okay, Gil Seralini wrote a paper about that, and he said 80% of them are neurotoxic. The other 20% are goitrogenic, so they're indirectly neurotoxic. Okay, so that's part of why people are so stupid. Also, because the schools dumb them down, etc. Okay, Dutton continues. We have a genius famine, partly because social institutions no longer recognize or nurture genius, and partly because the modern West is actively hostile to genius. What I've seen is most of the Western institutions, they've now been infiltrated by left-wing, lefty, pinko, commie, sort of cow, then moon, then you know what word comes next, east. That group, like the Soviets, who destroy achievement. They destroy meritocracy. They don't want it. They want to destroy these institutions. They want the West to collapse, okay? And that's why almost all of our institutions, what's your typical institution? It's either typically run by an evil scumbag or it's run by an incompetent conformist minority affirmative action dummy who does whatever they're told, okay? If a minority is highly intelligent, I'm Hispanic, I'm half Puerto Rican, okay? Nobody ever offers me a job for anything. No one ever wants me to be in charge of anything because I'm totally nonconformist, super intelligent, super competent. I would not go along with their BS. They want some low IQ conformist minority that'll just do whatever corrupt BS that they tell them to do, okay? You think, what would happen if they put me in charge of the school system? I would cancel this, castration, gender-affirming bullshit the next day, okay? I would stop selling amphetamines to children. That's horseshit, okay? I would stop this centralization of education with all the nonsense, waste of time programs they have. I would make, made illegal medicine assistance in dying where they encourage teenagers to commit suicide. I would make all of that stuff illegal, okay? So they would never want a guy like me who would make things better for the kids, for the students, okay? Let's continue here. The average PhD student in education has an IQ of around 117. The average PhD student in physics has an IQ of about 130. The brain of a genius is differently wired from a normal brain. It is specialized. Some circuits, usually used for social intelligence and reproductive success, are co-opted to serve a creative purpose. That's another point, too. A lot of geniuses get so busy with their work, they forget they have kids. I know a lot of female doctors. They're not geniuses, but they're reasonably smart. And they're so busy being doctors, they forget they have kids. Okay, a lot of the great geniuses never had kids. Look at, Isaac Newton. Look at Michelangelo. Look at Ayn Rand. Okay? This is why personality and intelligence go together in genius, because they're using that extra energy to focus on their ideas. Something deep within the genius makes him want to fully comprehend, to improve or express the nature of reality. Pursuing this quest is the destiny of the genius. It is what he is meant to do. Notice that the geniuses often feel a sense of destiny, and this is what Christianity gives you. If you look at a lot of these Eastern cultures, like, in India, for example, all this Hindu, Buddhism stuff and whatever. I don't really know Indian religion too well, but I do know the book by Vishal Mangalwadi, who said that basically they talk about this concept of Maya, that life has no meaning, that you can never really understand life, so why bother? So you get a high IQ person with that type of philosophical perspective on the world. They just want to make some money for themselves, for their family, maybe help out some co-ethnic friends. That's about it. Okay, they don't have an aspiration to change the world, to make, to improve literature, to improve science. It's like, why would I want to waste all my energy on that? I don't get any money. I can tell you, like, what my friend said to me when I was writing a book. This is about 5 years ago. And they go, Pete, are you going to make any significant money with this book? I said, no, probably not. They go, is it going to help you get laid? I said, no, probably not. They go, well, then why are you doing it? And what I'm trying to say is, a genius does something because he knows it's good, he knows it's right. And Christianity gives you a view of the world that basically, as long as you think Christ would be happy with what you're doing, that's good. That's also why rulers hate Christianity, because the Christian is obligated to God. The Christian's not obligated to some, dime store ruler who's a ruler of the moment who's just hassling people. Okay, so rulers hate that. Rulers want to be the equivalent of the Roman emperors, like gods, all right? And that's why you have to have a society that allows genius to flourish, because geniuses are going to be very nonconformist just by definition, because their knowledge and understanding is beyond the conformist way of doing things, which is largely shaped by the ruler. Okay? Let's see here. Newton's intellectual ability, his intelligence was obviously stratospheric. Newton, as a child and a young man of science, would spend nearly all of his time alone. When Newton was asked how he made his discoveries, he said, by thinking on it continually. I keep the subject constantly before me. Like when they had a plague year in 1665, Anno Mirabilis, he went to his family cottage in Woolsthorpe, and he just worked on optics and calculus and gravity and figured all this stuff out by himself. Newton had a rough childhood. His mother, actually, after his father died, his mother went and fell in love with this rich guy, and the guy didn't want Newton around, so she just left him with some relatives. He's by himself. They try to make a farmer out of Newton. He doesn't want to be a farmer. He's misunderstood, by himself, sad and lonely, just read a lot. Okay, extended loneliness in reading is a common childhood for geniuses. It's good for kids to be alone because then they're bored, then they got to figure out what to do with their boredom, and that often gets them to read. And then while they're reading, they start getting ideas, learning something. They don't learn anything when you're with a bunch of kids your own age. All you do is you care about popularity. It's like the book Con per Chicos by Ayn Rand, how she says it destroys the mind for children to be around their same age peers too much when they're young. Okay, Dutton and Charlton are continuing. Here's what they say. Carl Jung had a long-term live-in mistress who functioned as a second wife. Okay, and that was my joke about Carl Jung. I thought he was kind of full of shit when I first read him, but then when I realized he was smart enough to talk his wife into letting him have a mistress live in the backyard apartment, I thought, gosh, he must be a genius after all. Okay. Okay, same thing with that Stephen Hawking. I thought he was full of shit, atheist, and sort of a half-assed physicist. Okay, but then I realized with his ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and he still seduced 2 nurses. I'm like, how does a paralyzed, crippled guy in a wheelchair seduce 2 nurses? He must be a genius after all. Okay, I'm just kidding. But continuing with Charlton and Dutton, all right? Only an inner-orientated personality can be sufficiently independent of the social consensus so as to be able to change the social consensus. Charles Murray, in his book Human Accomplishment, finds that the Europeans are behind the overwhelming majority of important scientific and artistic accomplishments between classical times and 1950. So if you hear that, between classical times, which means the ancient Greeks, about 500 BC, to 1950, the vast majority of achievements have been achieved by people from Western civilization, okay? It was the ancient Greeks. A lot came out of Rome, but nothing like the ancient Greeks. And then out of Christian Europe, okay? And if you look at the high IQ Indians, for example, look at Dinesh D'Souza. He becomes a Christian, he becomes this genius, writes all these books, and makes all these movies, okay? Look at Vishal Mangalwadi, his magnificent books after he became a Christian. Being a Christian inspires you to try to become a genius. In comparison, again, with other cultures, like you would invent something in China, for example, and there'd be a brutal dictator who would say, hey, I want that invention for myself, takes the property away from the genius inventor. Then the other smart guy see, oh, gee, you invent something, it just gets stolen away from you. Your property was not secure, so why bother trying to make all that effort to invent something? It takes a lot of effort, okay? In other places, like I said, there's no motivation for it. You don't have a God-based worldview. Christianity says the universe is rational, so that motivates you to make an achievement. And nowadays, they use multiculturalism to destroy Western civilization, so you're not supposed to say, oh, is it rude to say, no, Western civilization created most of what we consider the modern world. The Industrial Revolution happened in Western civilization. It did not happen in all these other civilizations. When it comes to technology, they are not equal. When it comes to literature, they are not equal. When it comes to painting, they are not equal. Western civilization is clearly superior, and it should be proud of itself. And right now, the rich, super rich, are trying to destroy all of Western civilization. And what they have done is they've used the public schools to get the average pro to think that Western civilization was no big deal. They don't understand. It's the greatest achievement of mankind, and it's taken thousands of years to build it up. And once the rulers can get rid of it, as they're doing right now, then, all bets are off. It's just going to be endless slavery, okay? And like I said, in the Roman Empire, that's how it was with the Roman emperors, a lot of them were good, but a lot of them were bad. But in the modern world, it's going to be worse because technology is going to empower the ruler so much more. Okay? Let's see what else he says. He says, Northeast Asians are in second place for human accomplishment, but their contribution is relatively small. Despite having significantly higher IQ intelligence than Europeans, outscoring them by around 5 points, they've achieved less because of their cultural things. If you have a collectivist society like a lot of Eastern cultures, that diminishes individual achievement. Versus Western civilization had tremendous appreciation for the individual. That came out of the ancient Greeks, like Aristotle. Aristotle is a great individualist. Like Ayn Rand said, Aristotle is the greatest philosopher who ever lived. Aristotle is like the Atlas who carries the world upon his shoulders. Whenever you have an Aristotelian mindset, and I would add a Christian mindset, you get tremendous achievement, and that's what led to the Renaissance. That's what led to the Victorian Revival in the 1800s, and the Victorian Renaissance in the 1800s, and the Catholic Revival at the same time. Okay? I've made separate videos about all that stuff. To become an expert, a genius level performer here, you need to learn the hierarchy of categories in one's domain. You need to learn what causes what. Causation is the most important thing to know in most domains. You should know the procedures and scripts in one domain. You should seek ongoing improvement. You must take on the new challenging cases in your own domain. You have to keep on facing more and more complex problems in your domain. You should be able to discuss them nimbly. You should be well versed in all the subtlety and nuance of them. If you're going to come up with anything different, you have to know the current very well, okay? You should be obsessed with the topic and steeped in relevant info so that you can come up with profound observations and new insights. So here's a quote by Henry Amiel. To do easily what is difficult for others, that is talent. To do what is impossible for others, that is genius. Okay, here's a quote by Schopenhauer. Talent hits a target that no one else can hit. Genius hits a target that no one else can see. Okay, that's it for Genius Quotes for today. Hope that was interesting and helpful.